the darkest winter, the Great Reset, the Fourth Industrial Revolution, and what all of it has to do with the 2020 elections. The coronavirus pandemic and both presidential candidates refusing to back down. Go ahead and smash that like button, take a couple deep breaths, because we're going to do a deep dive on a sobering look at what's to come in this country and around the world right here on Waking Infinity. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is Waking Infinity News. I'm your host, Ben Stewart, and the intention of this entire news program is to give you clear vision on what's happening in the world so you can have better understanding of what your role is, and that way you can then arrive at your own best action. I'm going to give you a bunch of things that may look like they are the enemy, the problem. And then at the end, I'm going to give you a lot of solutions that are immediately actionable and absolutely free. Okay? Today we're going to be talking about voter fraud. But not just the voter fraud you're hearing about on the regular news. No, this is an elevated news piece that is going to look beyond and also beneath all the surface veneer of what this voter fraud pandemonium seems to be. All the endless bickering about the elections, all the divisiveness between left-right politics. And we're going to start getting beneath all the massive ocean of details that you can get lost in for days and months and years. And we're going to get at the agenda that underlies all of it. This is nothing to fear. So let's get to it. How old is voter fraud? If you go back 4 years, Hillary Clinton was screaming voter fraud. Before that, you go back to Bush v. Gore, right? Bush stole the election by a very narrow margin from Al Gore, and Al Gore was saying voter fraud. But you can actually go back to the Chicago Tribune of 1923 and see that Al Capone's battle for Cicero includes ballots and bullets in one of the most violent voting events in history. Prior to that, the term cooping was known as gangs would force people to vote more than once in different disguises, often with drugs and alcohol involved. Some say Edgar Allan Poe was a victim of cooping, as his dead body was found outside a polling location in 1849 in Baltimore on Election Day. In fact, if you go back to the book of Kings in the Bible, you'll see that after the death of his elder brother Amnon, who raped his half-sister, and Absalom, who killed Amnon for raping his sister, Adoniah considered himself the heir apparent to the throne. He acquired chariots and a large entourage. However, the priest Zadok, meaning righteous or justified, Benaiah, meaning to build, who was the head of the king's bodyguard, and Nathan, the court prophet, as well as others, did not side with Adoniah. So Nathan warned Solomon's mother, who reminded King David of a previous promise that he made to King Solomon to be his successor. He agreed, and Solomon became the king. So now let's skip ahead a couple millennia to today, the 2020 elections. President Donald Trump refusing to concede, as most of the mainstream media is saying, we have a new president, Joe Biden, and a new vice president, Kamala Harris. He's refusing to concede because he's saying there's voter fraud and impropriety. Voter fraud is different than impropriety because impropriety really just talks about the process of voting has been violated. We'll get into that in a bit. But throughout all of history, there's been a lot of talk of whoever sits in power, it's very controversial how they got there. So this shouldn't be surprising us. But lo and behold, a lot of people out there seem to be completely surprised and disgusted that this is how the election process seems to go. Now let's talk about what the mainstream media is saying across the board. You have tech giants like Jeff Bezos from Amazon, Bill Gates, formerly of Microsoft, and also former Republican President George W. Bush saying, congratulations, Joe Biden, this looks like a completely fair election. And you have the mainstream media, at least on the left side, saying across the board, there is no evidence of voter fraud. Now, what does the word evidence mean? It doesn't mean proof. It doesn't mean anything has been proven, but evidence means some evidence is coming forward. And you have to look at the evidence to see if it actually paints the picture that there is voter fraud. So, is there evidence of voter fraud? Well, it turns out there's quite a bit. Here's Ben Swann talking about just what happened in Nevada according to a sworn affidavit.
In this affidavit, the worker claims that they personally witnessed two people handing multiple unopened mail-in ballot envelopes to two other people who then opened and filled out the ballots against the side of a Biden-Harris van. In another case, the worker claims that a group of people, quote, formed a human wall to block visibility as they were marking ballots and placing those ballots in pink and white return envelopes. Quote, when the moving human wall of people noticed me walking by, they continued moving to block my view as I walked, the affidavit reads. The whistleblower alerted the team leader who called the Clark County Elections Office.
So that's in Nevada. But wait, there's more. The chair of the Republican National Party told Sean Hannity on Fox News that she had sworn affidavits showing evidence of 11,000 cases of voter fraud. Now here's an article from the Washington Post that states that a man named Richard Hopkins made allegations against Erie, Pennsylvania postal worker for backdating mail-in ballots, which is a no-no. But the title of the article says that he recants his allegations, claiming Project Veritas misquoted and, in a sense, penned his allegations. Well, here's Richard Hopkins himself setting the record straight.
I am right at this very moment looking at an article written by Washington Post. It says that I fabricated the allegations of ballot tampering. I'm here to say that I did not recant my statements. That did not happen. I would like that the Washington Post recant their wonderful little article that they decided to throw out there.
Right after Richard Hopkins made his original statement, the FBI agent, the inspector general of that post office, came in and had to interrogate Richard Hopkins. So this FBI agent goes into his interrogation. Unbeknownst to him, it was being recorded by Hopkins. And here is some audio to show you some of the mental aikido that was going on in this interrogation.
This storm is getting crazy, right? And it's out of a lot of people's control. And so the reason they called me in is to try to harness that storm, try to reel it back in before it gets really crazy. Okay?
I understand.
Because we have senators involved, we have the Department of Justice involved, we have
Trump's lawyers team's gotten a hold of me.
I'm not, well, I am actually. I am trying to twist you a little bit because in that, believe it or not, your mind will kick in.
Okay.
We like to control our mind, and when we do that, we can convince ourselves of a memory. But when you're under a little bit of stress, which is what I'm doing to you purposely, your mind can be a little bit clearer. And we're going to do a different exercise too to make your mind a little bit clearer. Okay?
Good to go.
So, but this is all on purpose.
Roger.
I'm not scaring you, but I am scaring you.
Sounds like a completely normal form of discourse. I was talking to my wife this morning like that. I was trying to convince her that she ate the last piece of chocolate when I know, in fact, it was me. This is an FBI agent refusing to allow this person's sworn testimony to make it to the public. Why? Because there's a lot of people implicated in it, and there's a storm that he's trying to harness. What is this storm? I'll get into that in a bit when I get into Dark Winter, the Great Reset, the Fourth Industrial Revolution that's coming. That's here, actually. But first I want to show you, here is yet another case. Here is James O'Keefe from Project Veritas, who confronts a woman on her form of voter fraud.
We have you on tape admitting to coercing voters and bribing voters with gifts. This is you on video telling someone who to vote for, which is a violation of federal law and state law.
Now, you know, on here, you chose a Republican, not a Democrat, right? Can I do that? You can vote for whoever you want, but our conversation that we had, you said you were voting for Hager because you were going straight Democrat. So that way you're voting for the straight Dem. Is that what you want to do, correct? And she's like, well, yeah, you know what, you're right.
And then she changed, she was clearly voting for John Cornyn.
Do you think it's okay to change people's votes for them like you did with Ms. Do you think that's acceptable?
I refuse to talk to you right now.
You're on tape doing it. Do you not see that? Look at this.
This is what they've asked me to say, so no.
Okay, but you actually did that.
I'm done. I'm leaving.
Now what I would like to ask of the audience is to take a couple deep breaths and take a look at this without being identified with left-right politics. Doesn't matter which candidate got in. This is about our system. This is about how we allow power on a collective scale to step into those positions. All right? In this whole process, this woman said, I was told to do that. This is at least evidence that there is voter fraud. Evidence. It's not proof. May not even overturn anything like the 2020 elections, but we need to start thinking of what this means in terms of the process of how we allow for a representative of the most powerful position in our nation to take that spot. If this is evidence, and she was told to do this, that might be evidence that this is systematic. Okay, could all these things be completely separate? For sure. Might they be? I'm not opposed to that idea. But if it is systematic, there's two things that we can consider. Well, three things that we can consider. One, that this was all planned by the Trump campaign, that they were going to cause a problem. And in fact, I will get into the Transition Initiative Project, who, if you look at that Wikipedia for Transition Initiative Project, you will find a ton of resources at the bottom of articles of people saying this is what Trump intends to do, to push back the election. He's not going to step down from power. So that's one of the three ideas that we can consider. And sure, there's more outside of that, but just bear with me. Trump planned all of this. He refuses to step down from power. And this is his plan playing out. And he intends to stay in power to disrupt the way we allow for the natural and fair election process to bring new people into that position of power. That's number one. Number two, that it actually happened on the other side, that the Biden camp or people in that administration want to get Trump out of office, so they did whatever they could, creating new ballots, signing them in for dead people, which there's a lot of evidence of that, and let's just say impropriety in the process of the election. So option two is it's the Biden camp, and this is systematic. Option three, and actually there's a fourth option here, because option three would just be that these are just glitches. Out of millions and millions of people voting, you're going to get these problems. Okay, now option number four. There's a higher level agenda, and all of this bickering about it's Trump's fault, it's Biden's fault. I invite you to at least entertain this option as I take you through some of these other topics that we're going to get into. Darkest winter, or the dark winter. The Great Reset and the Fourth Industrial Revolution. If these terms don't mean anything to you, again, take a deep breath, try and open your mind, and remember that I am not here to disempower. I'm not here to scare you. I'm here to enlighten you. And just like in an ayahuasca experience, a plant medicine experience, or sometimes just having to face our shadow and face our ego, the transcendent experience of going beyond our limitations often isn't a peachy process. Sometimes we have to face extremely difficult parts about ourselves that we would rather not face. So when we come face to face with this part of ourselves, what do we have to do? Sometimes we say, no, I don't want to face it. Please make it stop. Other times we just have to breathe through it, get through it. And then on the other side of it, as we realize all of this was our choice and well within our power, because the power is always in the hands of the people, the most limitless species that we know on this planet, then what we'll need to do is take directed action in the days, weeks, and months to come, because this thing that they're calling the dark winter is inside the room now. It's no longer on its way, it's here. So, what is the dark winter?
What do you mean when you say 2020 will be the darkest winter in modern history?
In our country in 2017, we had nearly 79,000 people die in the U.S. from influenza. That, coupled with a COVID-19 resurgence this fall, could be devastating for our healthcare systems and for Americans. We have a limited window of opportunity to get plans in place to address both of those.
An unsettling warning from the government's former top vaccine expert, Dr. Rick Bright. That's who we're talking about. that the United States is headed for, in his words, quote, the darkest winter in modern history, with unprecedented illness and fatalities unless something changes now.
We're about to go into a dark winter. A dark winter.
Here's a clip from a short documentary that just came out drawing correlations between the 2001 emergency drill called Operation Dark Winter with exactly what's playing out in 2020.
We are in the last few months of a tumultuous year, and it appears that there might be more unprecedented events on the way. As we near election 2020, it's important to step back and analyze the potential plans of the predator class. Specifically, it's important to understand a number of recent government simulations and exercises. First, let's look at the exercise known as Event 201. 1 year ago, on October 18, 2019, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation partnered with the Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security and the World Economic Forum on a high-level pandemic exercise known as Event 201. Event 201 simulated how the world would respond to a fictional coronavirus pandemic known as CAPS, which swept around the planet. The simulation imagined 65 million people dying, mass lockdowns, quarantines, and censorship of alternative viewpoints under the guise of fighting disinformation, and even floated the idea of arresting people who question the pandemic narrative.
The outcome of the CAPS pandemic in Event 201 was catastrophic.
Another important exercise was known as Crimson Contagion and simulated an outbreak of a respiratory virus originating from China. From August 13 to August 16, 2019, Trump's Department of Health and Human Services, headed by Alex Azar, partnered with numerous national, state, and local organizations for the exercise. According to the results of the October 2019 draft report, the spread of the novel avian influenza named H7N9 resulted in 110 million infected Americans, 7.7 million hospitalizations, and 586,000 deaths. Another simulation known as Clade X took place on May 2018. This event examined the response to a pandemic resulting from the release of a fictional virus known as Clade X. In the simulation, the virus was released by a terror group called A Brighter Dawn. As the outbreak spread through the United States, the participants asked what would be needed if the president issued a federal quarantine, noting that the authorities would need to, quote, determine the level of force authorized.
Take a look at what's happening here, folks. Dark winter. A brighter dawn. Dark winter, a brighter dawn. It's word magic, folks, here to make you fear the solution and accept the nightmare. Mind you, all of these events happened before the world knew anything about the coronavirus pandemic. How could that be? Hate to be sarcastic here, folks, but I wonder if this was all a setup from the start.
It would be easy to dismiss these exercises as politically driven fantasy if the people involved had not already publicly advised their candidates not to concede the election under any circumstances. Most recently, media reports indicated the Transition Integrity Project held a number of exercises simulating what might happen in the event that Donald Trump loses the 2020 election but refuses to leave office. The Boston Globe reported that the TIP met in June to simulate the 11-week period between Election Day on November 3rd and Inauguration Day on January 20th, 2021. The exercises state that, quote, Trump and his Republican allies used every apparatus of government, the Postal Service, state lawmakers, the Justice Department, federal agents, and the military to hold on to power, and Democrats took to the courts and the streets to try to stop it.
I'm not saying that all of this is fake, but I believe if you are still clinging to left-right politics as one side will save you and the other will destroy you, you may not be seeing the Hollywood magic of it all.
2020 could be the darkest winter in modern history.
Britain is braced for a dark winter as new measures are deployed to stem a surge of coronavirus.
New signs of a fall surge and perhaps an even more painful winter as coronavirus cases soar in the U.S.
We're about to go into a dark winter. A dark winter.
Kind of sounds like in Game of Thrones when they kept saying, winter is coming, and the night is dark and full of terrors. It's almost like these catchphrases have to instill some kind of word magic inside of us. So, here's what Wikipedia has to say about Operation Dark Winter that happened 3 months before September 11th, 2001, in a simulation that shows what would happen if there was a smallpox epidemic. Here in Wikipedia, you'll see that A lot of things that are happening this year were actually predicted. Things about the breakdown between the federal and the state governments, the lack of belief and trust in governments or media sources from the people, some of the people demanding vaccines right away, some of the people pushing back against mandatory vaccines. Mind you, this was in 2001 when all of this started coming to pass. Now take a look at what Wikipedia says about the Transition Initiative Project. This project, if you go and look at the resources like I told you, almost every single one of them is a left-leaning resource. Almost every single one of them is anti-Trump. And again, before you think that I'm leaning in the terms of trying to back up Trump, I actually feel like both of them are either being played or both of them are part of the theater, so we can be hypnotized by what's happening in politics. And then we will have to beg for some kind of governmental intervention, and the government would come in and say, you know what, this is bigger than us. We need to bring in global agencies like the World Economic Forum, World Health Organization, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Johns Hopkins University, and all their data, and bring that together to figure out how we can do what? Well, this is what David Icke said, problem, reaction, solution. You create a problem, create the problem, and then after the reaction from the people happens and they demand some kind of solution, then the people who created the problem say, well, here's a solution, and the solution looks perfect. Why? Because it's the perfect solution to the invented problem. I'm not saying this is what is happening. What I'm saying is please open your mind to the fact that things on a global scale may go above your pay grade as Joe Blow. And we're all Joe Blows, really. If you're not an elite, if you're not in that country club, you're a Joe Blow or a Jane Blow. Sorry. We're all in that grassroots movement. But that apology is really to say you don't belong there and the power belongs in our hands. So I want you to look at this Wikipedia page for the Transition Initiative Project. And what this shows is that neither Trump nor Biden might back down from power. There are different scenarios of what will happen throughout the elections. Civil unrest would be seen almost all year, just like we've seen it. The pandemic projections about media and vaccines are all pretty spot on when you go back to Operation Dark Winter Wikipedia. And all of this seems to tie into the World Economic Forum. So now I'd like to show you an article from Collective Evolution authored by Joe Martino about the Great Reset and how that plays into everything we're seeing right now. The article says, the World Economic Forum has put forth the Great Reset Initiative. The House of Windsor and the UN are prime executive co-producers. Top sponsors are BP, MasterCard, and Microsoft. Paraphrasing here, COVID and all other crises will, as they say, be a part in shaping the global relations, directing national economies, prioritizing of societies, the nature of business models, and the management of global commons. And according to Ellen Brown, this is a part of the same Collective Evolution article, chair of the Public Banking Institute says that no country will be allowed to opt out because it would be endangering the rest, which has an air about it like the vaccine debate. It's endangering other people if you don't get the vaccine. And she goes on to say, to escape the trap of the globalist agenda, we need a mass awakening to what is really going on and a collective resistance to it while there is still time. People, I cannot agree more. I think what we really need is a unified grassroots movement here that allows us to acknowledge what's happening, acknowledge all the possibilities so we're not duped, stay unified so no matter what the issue is, the solution is still the same, and get over the bickering of this is my candidate, that's the evil person, or this is my candidate, and that's the evil person. All of it is doing the same exact thing, and the thing that it's doing is the problem. The existence of the left-right paradigm is simply a tool, and we're falling for it. The problem is we, as the people, are dividing ourselves. So the resistance needs to be unified. But before I get into the solutions, I really need to show you guys one more piece of media from Dr. Buttar that shows that COVID-19 is the agenda that ushers in the Great Reset, the Fourth Industrial Revolution, and this dark winter.
So here's what it comes down to. The roadmap and aim was set out by the PMO and is as follows. Phase in secondary lockdown restrictions on a rolling basis, starting with major metropolitan areas first and expanding outward. Expected by November 2020. Next one. Rush the acquisition of or construction of isolation facilities across every province and territory. Expected by December 2020. These are concentration camps they're talking about. Daily new cases of COVID-19 will surge beyond capacity of testing. Interesting that they already know that they're going to surge, right? Expected by end of November 2020. Complete and total secondary lockdown, much stricter than the first and second rolling phase restrictions. Expected by end of December 2020, early January 2021. Reform and expansion of the unemployment program to be transitioned into the Universal Basic Income Program, expected by Q1 2021. Projected COVID-19 mutation and or co-infection with secondary virus referred to as COVID-21, leading to a third wave with much higher mortality rate and higher rate of infection, expected by February 2021. Enhanced lockdown restrictions referred to as third lockdown will be implemented. Full travel restrictions will be imposed, including inter-province and intercity, expected by Q2 2021. Projected supply chain breakdowns in inventory storage, large economic instability, all expected late second quarter 2021. Deployment of military personnel into major metropolitan areas as well as all major roadways to establish travel checkpoints, restrict travel and movement, provide logistical support to the area, expected by third quarter 2021. All right, guys, this is where it gets really disturbing, as if it's not already disturbing. What we are told was that in order to offset what was essentially an economic collapse on an international scale, that the federal government was going to offer Canadians a total debt relief. So people are getting excited about that. That sounds good, but wait. This is how it works. The federal government will offer to eliminate all personal debts, all mortgages, all loans, all credit cards, etc., which all funding will be provided to Canada by the IMF under what will become known as the World Debt Reset Program. In exchange for acceptance of this total debt forgiveness, the individual would forfeit ownership of any and all property and assets forever. In exchange for acceptance of this total debt forgiveness, the individual would forfeit ownership of any and all property and assets forever. The individual would also have to agree to partake in the COVID-19 and COVID-21 vaccination schedule, which will provide the individual with unrestricted travel and unrestricted living even under a full lockdown. So if you agree, you can go do anything you're doing as long as you partake in the COVID-19 and COVID-21 vaccination schedule, regardless of the lockdown. Magically you take this vaccine and boom, guess what? You don't have to social distance, you don't have to wear a mask anymore because you have already gotten your vaccines. We were told that those who refused would first live under the lockdown restrictions indefinitely, and that over a short period of time, as more Canadians transitioned into the debt forgiveness program, the ones who refused to participate would be deemed a public safety risk and would be relocated into isolation facilities. Once in those facilities, they would be given two options: participate in the debt forgiveness program and be released, or stay indefinitely in the isolation facility under the classification of a serious public health risk and have all your assets seized. In the end, it was implied by the PMO that the whole agenda will move forward no matter who agrees with it or not. That it won't just be Canada, but in fact, all nations will have similar roadmaps and agendas. That we need to take advantage of the situations before us to promote change on a grander scale for the betterment of everyone. All I know is that I don't like it, and I think it's going to place Canadians into a dark future.
It would be very easy to get really scared by the language that he shared. He's talking about concentration camps. He's talking about there is no country that is allowed to opt out. He's talking about we are going to have our assets, our property, all of our things seized no matter what. We have to be vaccinated, whether we want to or not. The science is absolutely clear. We must get vaccinated. There's Bill Gates saying there's not a choice in the matter. We don't get back to normal until we have largely vaccinated the entire global population. He goes off of science is on our side. And I've gotten into this in Esoteric Agenda 2, which is on benjosephstewart.com. I highly recommend you go check that out. And without pointing fingers at the people who are saying we need to usher this in, instead of silencing the virus, what we need to do is call out the medicine from within. So what the coronavirus is the implementation plan. It is the impetus and the excuse by which all this new technology in the fourth industrial revolution will be thrust upon us. I say thrust upon us because it's not forced yet, because we are going to ask for it. That's their plan, is for us to ask for it. Why? For the same reason why you have Event 201, which is identical to what happened in the coronavirus pandemic, to a T, because the simulation, in a sense, has to say, hey, this is part of the plan. And I'm not saying that all of this was made up and it's all theater. I am at least open to the idea that an exact replica of what happened in 2020 was a simulation that went down at the end of 2019. I'm open to that synchronicity, okay? But we also have to be open to the synchronicity that this is an agenda that has been put forth for many, many, many years. And in order to do this, we need to have been told what the agenda is. And once we're told, then it's almost like the fine print in a contract. If we say yes to it, it is assumed that we've gone back and done our homework and said yes to all of that fine print. Therefore, in magic, which all of this is word magic, in magic, that is our consent. We acquiesce to the intervention that is to come in. So all of this is magic to build an infrastructure for what I believe to be an AI God. Now, many people would think, okay, Ben, you're going way off your rocker. You're talking about things that are more sci-fi than I can wrap my head around. I'm not asking for you to believe it. I am asking for you to go and research everything that I'm showing you. All the resources that I'm showing you show you that all of it is out in the open. I'm showing you resources that you can go find. The World Economic Forum website on its own. There's information on the Fourth Industrial Revolution and the Great Reset Initiative you can find on your own. The Dark Winter Operation is Wikipedia. The Transition Initiative Project is also found on Wikipedia. Everything is right out in the open. However, I do like to go a little beyond and say, I think maybe there's something beneath the surface that's happening. I do believe it has to do with magic. So I do believe that the solution comes from us not handing over our consent, meaning we need our own language and we need to understand the way they use language and the way they use law, which all law is based upon that kind of word magic, in order to combat it, to keep our sovereignty on a contractual level. And that contract is not in legal senses in this three-dimensional world, it's the spiritual contracts. So now I want to bring you guys into what I believe are the solutions. So we'll hear about things like meditation, cleaning up your diet, doing proper exercise, moving in nature, having community, learning from the blue zones that are out there and how they have long life expectancies, learning from people like Dr. Joseph Mercola, Dr. Arthur Furstenberg, Dr. Thomas Cowan, Dr. Martin Pall about the effects of non-ionizing radiation from things like our technology, all of our devices. Learning from other people out there who have found a way to calm their nervous system down and realize that solutions always and only emerge from within. Once we become heart-centered and once we still our consciousness and realize that we are the most limitless technology in the universe, then we start to come back and realize that we hold 100% of the cards. And the only way that all of this can even be thrust upon us is if we unwittingly say yes. Say, please come in and take care of this mess. You're showing us all the different angles in which I am threatened. Just take care of it, please. I want to get back to all my movies. I want to go Netflixing. I want to be on my device. I want to block out the world because I've gotten used to my affluence. I've gotten used to things being taken care of for me. So here are my very condensed solutions to the problems at hand. If you're worried about the health problems, take enough iodine. That's good for radiation. It helps your thyroid. But make sure you take the right kind of iodine and you don't take too much of it. Take enough niacin. Take enough of the right kind of magnesium. Most of the non-ionizing radiation issues from all of our technology and Wi-Fi, they open the voltage-gated calcium channels in our body. What can help block that unfortunate event? Magnesium. Having enough magnesium in your body. I'll have resources and things that you guys can look into to see that even topical magnesium may work better and be absorbed better by the body than the kind that you take orally. So those are a couple things. Try chlorophyll, getting out into the sun, stepping on the earth with your bare feet. You might think this is very woo-woo, but the bottom line is the earth is proven to be a negative ion repository. All of the positive ions that cause free radical damage in the body from our technology can be mitigated if we do more standing on the earth and allowing for just that natural process of nature to take over so we can come back into alignment. I say look into Rafe Kelly and go climb some trees, go through waterfalls, look into Wim Hof, take cold showers and cold baths, learn how to get back into your breath. I say look into any kind of meditation process you can get into where you still the mind, you balance the nervous system, which in turn balances the endocrine system, which in turn balances everything about your heart, body, mind, and spirit. So beyond that, these are just the health effects. What can we do about the surveillance state? What can we do about the agendas that are being placed around us for the smart grid, all of our smart devices talking to one another, and eventually always having this surveillance around? What can we do about that? Well, take a look at people like Robert Spalding, retired Air Force general, who's talking about all of the dangers of 5G in a sense of the surveillance state that's coming. If you want to understand a little bit deeper on the magic that's happening right here, the word magic that's being played, please take a look at David Icke's work and Max Egan's work. If you're worried that they seem too conspiracy, there's plenty of people that don't even go nearly as far as them. David Avocado Wolf, Pete Evans, Kelly Brogan, these are all people that are talking about, first they were talking about health and they were just in the health realm. And now because of what's happening, they're being forced to come out and say, listen, none of this seems to make sense with the COVID-19 pandemic. There's so much evidence that shows that something else is going on here that at least you should entertain it. Open your mind to it so you know you're not in your own echo chamber only listening to views and beliefs that validate your pre-digested notions that you probably got from your parents, your community, and the news that you watch. Here's my last solution. Find your community. Find your tribe. You don't have to wake up the entire population. In fact, in the American Revolution, less than 4% of the entire U.S. population was involved in the American Revolution. And, according to history, it was successful. So, find your community. Find your tribe. Learn how to grow your own food. Find people that love doing things with their hands. Find people that love music. Find people that know about health. Find your tribe, surround yourself with them, and use all of the infrastructure that you may be worried about. Telecommunications, all the technology that was built, use it to wake others up. Don't worry about those who are not ready yet. Be gentle with them. Don't cut yourself off, your heart from their heart, simply because they don't believe their mind to your mind in the same things. Be gentle with yourself. Clean up your diet. Clean up your mind. Clean up your life. And get ready for the biggest transition in history. It is coming. It's at our door. Hesitation is the biggest enemy. Nothing else. You are the powerful one in this scenario. There is nothing outside of God that God does not have control of, and you are a piece of God. Step into that power. Don't disempower yourself and think that the outside world is coming to get you. If you understand that you are where all the power resides, none of this would scare you to begin with. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you so much for joining me on Waking Infinity News. Smash that like button. I'll catch you all next time.